Yes, good evening everyone.
Good evening.
Today at this 83rd Sunday Sahityak Satsang, I would like to invite Dr. Virendra Turkar to welcome the guest and introduce the Master of Ceremonies. Please, Dr. Virendra.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pramod, sir. Namaste and very good evening to one and all. As we all know that iSPELL India started its journey on 5th of September 2020. And right from its beginning up to now, iSPELL India has been continuously organizing Sunday Sahityak Satsangs, in which various webinars have been organized so far. As we all know that the motto of iSPELL India is to facilitate to elevate. And that's why it has been our main attempt to bring new faces on this platform. This is people's platform to give an opportunity to those who have been in darkness so far, despite having ability, competence, talent. And with this intent, we have been continuously organizing these events. Today also, we have come up here with a very creative webinar which will guide us about how to write research papers, which is actually a task that we have to face again and again during our academic life. So today, on this auspicious occasion of 83rd Sunday Sahityak Satsang, this webinar on Are You a Paper Tiger? Academia, Research and the Craft of Writing, I would like to welcome the keynote speaker of today's event, a very famous, well-known Dr. Prantik Banerjee, sir. I would like to welcome here Dr. R.A.F. Ajiz, sir, who is present over here as a chairperson of this event. I would like to welcome here Dr. G.A. Ghansham, sir, who is a source of constant inspiration for us, who is always there to support us and guide us wherever we find ourselves helpless or wherever we need any sort of help or guidance. I also welcome here Professor Anupama Ohra, ma'am, the President of iSPELL India, Mr. Pramod Dhengre, sir, IT Coordinator of iSPELL India, Dr. Yogesh Sarode, sir, the President of East Maharashtra Forum. So friends, today we are definitely going to witness a very useful and very knowledgeable, enlightening session, because this is the topic related to us, and this is the topic about which we all need a lot of information. So on this occasion, I would like to here take an opportunity to introduce the Master of Ceremony, one who is currently working as a sub-editor for the digital team of reputed newspaper, The Hindu. She has completed her course of journalism from University of Mysore and done a postgraduate diploma in multimedia journalism from IIJNM, Bengaluru. She is also pursuing MA in English literature from IGNOU. She has predilection for art, wildlife, and environment. So today we have such an innovative and creative mind with us as a master of ceremony, Miss Sindhu Nagaraj. I would like to request you to conduct the proceedings of today's ongoing session. Miss Sindhu Nagaraj, ma'am, Over to you.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. I now want to welcome Dr. Prantik Banerjee, Associate Professor, Department of English, Hislop College, Nagpur. He has an MA degree in English, an MPhil, and a PhD, along with a postgraduate diploma in journalism and mass communication. He is also a NAC and IQAC coordinator for the last 10 years. His areas of interest include cultural studies, energy and medical humanities, memory studies, cyberculture studies, film theory, post colonial studies, trauma theory, gerontology, and disability studies, among others. He is also involved in drafting higher education policies, quality assurance frameworks, and curriculum designing. He has been a keynote speaker and a resource person at several national and international conferences. He has been a member of Board of Studies at RTM Nagpur University, at Homi Bhabha State University, Mumbai, at VG Vaze College, Mumbai, a PhD supervisor for Rashtrasant Tukdoji Maharaj Nagpur University. He has also edited the Kakodkar Committee Report of National Institutes of Technologies. He is a credited HRD trainer from TCS Bengaluru. He is also the member of editorial board of international and national journals on higher education as well as English studies. His publications include 5 books, 8 book chapters, and 41 research papers in peer-reviewed journals. His writings have been published in several anthologies, including Globalization Reader, Nomadism Reader, Asian Literature in English, Films and Literature, Conflict Studies, and Race, Caste, and Gender. He is also a published poet and short story writer. His A Postscript on Missing Keys, an anthology of poems, was published by Writers' Workshop, Kolkata. His poems have been featured in Sahitya Academy's Indian Literature, Penn, Brown Critique, Kavya Bharati, Journal of Poetry Society of India, Little Magazine. His collection of short stories, The Keeper of the Dead and Other Stories, was published in June 2021. His achievements include several national and international awards, including International Award CLR Best Fiction Writer 2021 and Best Teacher on Campus Times of India Nagpur edition. I feel proud to welcome a person of such stature. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me quickly do a system check with you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Sindhu, and for that introduction. And, April is veritably the cruelest month. And to have a Sahityik Satsang at 4 on a Sunday afternoon is, for all practical purposes, quite a scorcher. I don't know. Probably the temperatures here are shooting well above 42 here. But then the fact that I can see that there are more than 61 participants who have joined, are with us on this platform, speaks volumes. Speaks volumes about the success of iSPELL. This is a platform where I had the privilege and the honor of being invited by Professor Ghanshyam a couple of seasons back, and it's been he and this platform iSPELL has been a trailblazer in many respects. In fact, one of the few positives that came out of an what should I say, an otherwise history-changing pandemic years was the ability of platforms such as iSPELL to reach out and connect teachers from the academia from across India. And the fact that we have today is the 83rd, isn't it? 83rd session of academic discourses over this platform once again says the intent, the purpose, as well as the dedication of not just Professor Ghanshyam, but also the office bearers. So thank you, iSPELL, for having me on this platform again today. And I welcome you all, and I say a very good evening to all of you. And thank you so much, Professor Sarode. He was the president of the Eastern chapter or the Vidarbha chapter of iSPELL, and also the chairperson, Professor Ajit, who will be chairing this session. Well, I've titled my talk as, Are You a Paper Tiger? Academia, Research, and the Craft of Writing. And I thought I'll share some of my experiences, or rather, some of my observations and inputs on research writing, particularly the fact that all of us who are in the academia these days seem to be seem to be on a special mission, and that is seem to be in the hunt you know, for our CAS scores. Uh, Among the many, not only has there been a virus of the COVID-19 that has spread a pandemic across the world, but our academia seems to be afflicted with a particular kind of bug, and that is the CAS bug, if I may say so. And that is, as we all know, the the minimum research score that all of us need to have in order to advance in our careers through promotion, which of course is based on a research score. So I thought that with so much of importance being given by all the higher education committees and councils in India, including the UGC, as well as the State Council of Higher Education on research, I thought I'll share some of my experiences and my observations on research writing. And so it's not entirely without a touch of irony that I've titled my talk today as Are You a Paper Tiger? Academia, Research, and the Craft of Writing. Well, I'd like to start by narrating to you a sort of a literary anecdote. You know, this is about Umberto Eco. Umberto Eco, the celebrated semiotician and postmodernist novelist, who 3 years before he came out with a groundbreaking novel, The Name of the Rose. The Name of the Rose came out, is regarded as a cult fiction, as an exemplary text of postmodernist fiction. And that, if I remember, that came out in 1980, but 3 years before the publication of Umberto Eco's now cult text called The Name of the Rose. In 1977, he published a book with a rather unpretentious title. The book was titled How to Write a Thesis. And this was a book that Umberto Eco published for his favorite audience, meaning teachers and students. Remember that he was a professor at the University of Turin, and so he converted all of his class notes, all of his lecture notes rather, much like Ferdinand Saussure, however. Of course, in Saussure's case, it was all his class notes or his lecture notes were turned into a book by his own students. But Umberto Eco decided to publish his own class notes or lecture notes on research writing, and came out with a book like I said, with an unpretentious title, How to Write a Thesis. The surprising thing about this book is that although the book has been translated over the years into 17 languages, it finally appeared in English in as late as in 2015. The book I mentioned Umberto Eco's book primarily because I find that the book delivers, it's a compendium of practical advice. I mean, it delivers it delivers all the nuts and bolts, all the useful tips. Umberto Eco gives a lot of useful tips on how a young researcher must proceed in her academic pursuit. So, for example, the book contains chapters and many invaluable advice for researchers on how to choose, for example, the right topic, how to develop the art, cultivate the art of note taking, and then how to master the final draft. All of these, meaningful lessons, these nuggets of wisdom that Umberto Eco puts in a book, which I feel, although written almost four decades back in 1977, is as relevant, or rather has not lost its relevance or its usefulness for researchers even today. In fact, I make it a point to suggest, to suggest to all my research scholars a compulsory reading of this book. And friends, the book, in fact, has many chestnuts. Umberto Eco gives us many chestnuts, many nuggets of wisdom in the book. And perhaps now is the time to show you a few slides a presentation on which I'll hook my talk. If I may be allowed to share my presentation, my screen.
Yes, sir, it is.
Do let me know if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, visible, sir.
Right. Yeah. So this is the book that I was referring to, Umberto Eco's How to Write a Thesis. And as I said, among the many chestnuts that he gives us in the book for a young researcher on how to carry on research or how to simply write a research paper or a thesis, the one standout one standout statement that I find in the book is when he says that that your thesis is like your first love. Your thesis is like your first love. It will be difficult to forget. And then you have it in different parts of the book, in different sections of the book, on where he talks about the stylistic aspects or academic writing. He says he gives us what not to do. For example, he says you are not Proust. Do not do not write long sentences. And then another chestnut where he says that you are not E. Cummings. He asks researchers to mind grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Well, at the end of this book, or rather in the course of the book, Eco gives us the thumb rule of any research writing. He says, you must write a thesis. You must write a thesis that you're able to write.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. Please make it a full screen, sir.
Yeah. Is that good?
No, sir.
Well,
Still
on
in
my
slide mode.
yeah,
Yes,
on my screen it is full screen.
Okay. Okay.
Don't know why.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah. So one of the things that he says is that that you must write a thesis. You must write a thesis or a paper that you are able to write. Now, this little nugget, this little advice that he gives, in fact, points out to one of the essential truths, one of the fundamental givens of good research writing, that good research and good academic style or good writing style are complementary. I mean, research cannot be good without a good writing style. The writing of an accurate, engaged, interesting, understandable paper is just as important as the research itself. This is one point that I'd like to highlight throughout my talk, which focuses on academic writing or research writing. That if research writing is a good, effective research academic style of writing is the sine qua non of quality research, then one needs to pay perhaps more attention than we have been paying to the style, to the way in which we write our papers, to the way in which we structure our research. Friends, I say this because based on my own experience of writing research, of doing research, as well as being a research supervisor for several universities, I find that a majority of research in India in English studies is unfortunately marred by poor academic writing. And I find that among the many things that one may mention as being responsible for a faulty, for a poor academic writing, I mean, two common reasons that I find are ambiguity and redundancy, ambiguity and redundancy. I feel take ambiguity. I mean, ambiguity. What I mean by ambiguity is that when researchers you write their interpretation or their analysis or put their findings in a style that is not very clear and precise. Or when research writing is marked by poor academic writing, which is characterized by, let's say, a poor organization of thoughts. And that includes even simple matters like an incorrect choice and order of words, that is syntax. And redundancy. Redundancy is the other major flaw that I find in much academic writing, in much research papers, and that often is the result of using superfluous words that make writing difficult to read and understand. I mean, there is a tendency among the research community, in our research community, that in order to make their papers seem heavy, one needs to put one's ideas and arguments in a high style. By that I mean there is a tendency. I think a peculiarity, call it a peculiarity with we Indians, of indulging in verbosity, where two words will do, where two words to explain a thing would do, we use 10 words. And this kind of intellectual pedantry, or this indulgence in verbosity, in academic verbosity, in fact, is the bane of good research, in my opinion. And many Indian researchers, therefore, seem to be what Shashi Tharoor would call, a sesquipedalist, a lover of big words. Take, for example, I mean, I hope my screen is moving, my slides are moving. Are we on the same slide? Research and high style?
Same slide, sir.
Research and high style?
No, this is the same slide that you
in that case. Right.
No.
Can you see research and high style?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. Okay. So, if you look at this particular slide, I mean, I've randomly picked up the titles of two papers, or one is from a thesis and the other is of a research paper. Take a look at the first one, for instance. It says, this is a thesis title, and it says language acquisition through social media discussions, potential of semantic network representations, and effect of conceptual facilitation restrictiveness. Would you like to spend a Sunday afternoon reading up a thesis like this, with a title like this? I'm not for a minute suggesting that the thesis may not be of interest, but what I'm saying is that the title of the thesis certainly is a big turn-off. It is very, very off-putting, and perhaps unknowingly, the research scholar may have unknowingly chosen a title which is so off-putting. Never mind that her research may be very good, in fact, otherwise. But titles, as we know, are like trailers of good movies, or they are like our calling cards. And therefore, one needs to be very, very particular about the way in which we title our papers and the way in which we title our thesis. And what doesn't work for me, in the title of this thesis is that what I find in the title is actually a cluster of compound words with no verbs. I mean, you have a number of, compound words here, compound nouns, language acquisition, social media discussions, then semantic network representations, and then there is another one, conceptual facilitation restrictiveness. I mean, all of them, at least when I came upon the title, actually seemed to be a lot of gobbledygook, made no sense. Even though one may not be a language expert or a linguistic a student of linguistics, but one can't really break through. One has no idea or no clue. One is given no idea or clue about what the paper is all about. And I feel that this is not an exception. It is not an exception, but generally there is a tendency for in the Indian research publishing world, or rather in the academia, to feel as if that one needs to write in a one needs to fill one's research writing, make it high and heavy. One needs to fill it with a lot of verbosity and especially jargon, in order to give it heft, in order to give your paper heft and weight, which is not really, which is just the other, which really works just the other way, because to write in a simple direct style is perhaps more complex and requires more skill than to put your ideas in a complex and complicated style. You see, at the end of the day, one thing is for sure. Yeah, as researchers, those of us who are interested, who are passionate about research, and who also are into reading scholarly writings, yes, there is an academic idiom. Yes, there is no doing away, or there is no doing away with jargon. That is the critical register of academic writing. But at the same time, I personally feel that there is a bit of obsession among among Indian researchers in trying to sort of compensate for the lack of quality in their interpretive analysis, or a lack of substantive findings in their research, by making it up, or rather by glossing it over with some heavy duty words. I I do therefore find, you know, I do believe, I do believe that researchers must cultivate a style which is simple, direct, and straightforward. Saying good ideas or original ideas in a simple, direct style is what is our ultimate purpose, and that is what is our ultimate purpose as researchers. Our ultimate purpose of being a researcher is actually to disseminate, is actually to circulate, to have our papers read by the largest number of people, by the greatest number of readers. And if we want to, and therefore it is important for turning our papers, making sure that our papers are reader-centric. Um, when we do research, whether you are writing a research paper or a thesis, we don't want our research findings, especially if you are very passionate and very sure about the originality of your writings. You don't want your good research paper or a good thesis to be read only by two people in your department, or one supervisor, or two or three examiners. Now, if your writing is original, if your paper is really innovative in its analysis, you want the academic world, you want to put it out there. You want to put it out there so that it will invite not just attention, but it will invite a critical discourse. It will invite people to comment. It will invite people to engage and discuss and debate, or even contest with your findings. And that is what research really is. Research is not just putting everything that you think is right with a particular text, or with a particular author, or a movement, or a trend onto onto a printed page, and with a closure, with a full stop. Research is, as the word says, is a constant searching, or a constant research is a constant search, and there are no closures to research. So to engage in research is in quality research, is to actually turn your findings, or turn your analysis, into a writing style which is simple, which is direct, which is straightforward. Of course, in an academic idiom, in an academic register, of course a given. What you see is a slide which is called titled "The Sokol Affair," and this again points out to what I'm trying to highlight, the lack of good quality writing in research and English studies in India. Of course, the Sokol affair happened elsewhere. In the late 1990s, Alan Sokol, a professor of physics at the New York University, he sort of he wrote a paper. Full of academic jargon. Remember, he was a professor of physics, but he wrote a paper on you know well, I don't really want to go into the details of it, but he wrote a paper full of academic jargon, and deliberately, because his intention was to find out if a paper written, what he says on the slide. There is a quote on the slide which says, I that he what he wanted to do was to try a modest experiment. Would a leading North American journal of cultural studies, whose editorial collective includes such luminaries as Frederick Jameson and Andrew Ross, publish an article liberally salted with nonsense if A, it sounded good, and B, it flattered the editor's ideological preconceptions? I want to focus more on that first part, as I've been talking in the last 5-10 minutes. On did does what Sokol wanted to find out was that if he loaded his paper with a lot of critical jargon, writing in the so-called heavy style that I was referring to, um, um, would it be accepted by uh, this leading research journal? In fact, the journal to which he sent this paper is a journal called Social Text. Social Text, an academic journal, in fact, which at one point in time um, was publishing the works of Edward Said and Frederick Jameson. And well, once Sokol had actually written this gibberish this paper full of gibberish, and had sent this paper to the editors, including Frederick Jameson of Social Text. Well, not surprisingly, or rather surprisingly, his paper was published. And when his paper was published, he took his paper as well to the public, and in fact told them, or what is there on your slide, that he was simply conducting an experiment to suggest that much of postmodern publication, this is something he did in the 1990s, and the 1990s, if you remember, is considered to be the high watermark of postmodernism. So Sokol, almost in disgust with the kind of dense, obtuse language that was being used in much postmodern theory writing, sort of protested, or showed his protest, or showed his dissent by writing a paper full of gibberish and getting it published in Social Text, and proving the point that if anyone, somebody like him, a professor of physics, could sort of mimic and imitate a style, a gibberish style, or a highfalutin style, and put his nonsensical findings in a proper idiom, well, it would be accepted even by the best of journals on social sciences. So the point that he was actually trying to make was to tell the academic world that, that kindly write, kindly convey, kindly turn your findings, your academic research, into a language which is understood, if not by the common people, if not by the common readers, at least by people from your own academia, from your own discipline. So, uh, well, if you friends, as a researcher, I think there is a moral in this story, the story about the Sokol affair, and that is, to repeat what I've earlier said, that if you have ideas, that if you consider that your interpretation or your analysis of a text or a particular literary trend or movement is something that is original and exciting, then you would want to put uh, all the stuff in your paper. You would want to communicate. You would want to communicate your findings or your analysis in a simple, direct, straightforward style, without trying to beat around the bush. So once again, a clear, cogent academic style of writing is the sine qua non of quality research. And because again, friends, no one is under any obligation, to read your paper other than yourself. Therefore, in order to make your research reader friendly, you must cultivate a style of writing that is inviting, that is engaging, that is thought provoking. So and as I said earlier, one does not write papers. One does not do research in order to confine one's findings to a minuscule academic community of 2 or 3 colleagues in your department. And many times you probably would have to bribe your own colleagues to go through your paper. So never mind that. One wants one's findings, analysis, or interpretation to be widely circulated for others to read and to contribute to the discourse. To contribute to the discourse. You know, the American philosopher and literary critic Kenneth Burke, he describes the research, or rather, he describes a research paper. He describes a research paper as an engagement in a conversation that may stretch back hundreds of years and may include any number of other scholarly voices. What he means by that, what Kenneth Burke really means, is that when you write a research paper, you are actually contributing to a conversation that may go back hundreds of years. You're making yourself, and by writing a research paper on a particular topic or on a particular subject, you are actually making yourself an informed participant in this academic discourse. For example, as a researcher writing a paper on a particular writer or on a particular author or a text, you become not just a careful reader of the text in question, but a historian of the text life. You know, for example, when the text was born, who were the friends and enemies of the text, or what the text accomplished, for better or worse, and how it has been remembered by those who came after it. And your paper, therefore, in contributing your paper to the conversations about the text, you as a researcher keeps the text alive. Not just the text, but the conversation alive, which is probably more important. So research writing really, is a conversation which is never really about a text or an author or a theory. It's about what we read, how we read, why we read, and what we value. What you see on your slide are two sets of titles. For example, the first set includes titles such as Post-Colonialism in the Fiction of Amitav Ghosh, Spirituality in Sri Aurobindo's Poetry, Feminism in the Novels of Shashi Deshpande. One thing, as I have noticed, is the tendency of many researchers to put in the title of their paper or of their thesis a standard phrase, a phrase which has become very standard, like a critical study of post-colonialism in the fiction of Amitav Ghosh. If research is not a critical study, then what is it? You don't really have to, you don't have to actually say that your research is a critical study. A research is critical study. It is tautology. It is again to be overstating the case. So you can't possibly think of research without using the word critical study, and therefore the use of the word critical study is absolutely irrelevant. It is unnecessary in a research paper. So so the difference, if you are able to spot the difference between the first bunch of paper titles with the second bunch, we don't really have it's easy to spot the difference, isn't it? Which one, according to you, is a better and more inviting or more interesting title of research papers? Which one would you prefer to read? The first set of 3 or the second set? You can unmute, and participants are free to unmute and let me know. It's a satsang, and therefore, you see, interaction is very important. It's a collective community discourse. Anyone? Which of these sets would you find interesting, and why? Well, we have 79 participants. Oh, I mean, that's quite a number. No? All right, I suppose, you know, well, friends, obviously the second set, representations of masculinity in post-independence Indian English novels, or on the home front, this gender disruption and the great. I mean, obviously, these are the papers that I found more interesting, more engaging, simply because they are very specific. They tell what the paper is all about, what its scope is, and and gives us the key words, that gives us the key words of the paper, the key terms or the key framework, the theoretical framework that the paper will use. So I find, for me, the second set of papers seem to be will be the one that I will be reading rather than the first set. The first set, coming back to that, drawing your attention to the first set, our universities continue to churn out mindless PhDs of this kind year after year, and in the process turning, what I call turning academia lucida into academia obscura, academia lucida into academia obscura. When a simple browse through the inflibnet or the swam platform will, if one were to go through the list of PhD topics on inflibnet, one finds any number of theses on writers like Shashi Deshpande, Girish Karnad, or on topics such as diasporic literature, um, that are simply recycling of previous works. I mean, I find at its worst, such research, if you can call them research, is plagiarism of previous bad research, or at its best, it's simply plagiarism of good research work with a few cosmetic changes. I mean, this is an unfortunate trend. But this is an unfortunate trend in English studies research, simply because it's not just reinventing the wheel, but it is reinventing the wheel. This kind of research simply adds more trash to the research recycle bin. So if you were a young researcher wanting to know, wanting to find some direction in what areas or what topics to research on, well, I find these topics, the second bunch of topics, which seem to be more inviting and more challenging. When I was a student, when I was doing my master's, one of my favorite poems was Wallace Stevens' 13 ways of looking at a blackbird. And what you see on the slide is a stanza which says, "I was of three minds, like a tree in which there are three blackbirds." I find the poem and what Wallace Stevens does in the poem a good analogy to the dilemma of the researcher in India, to the reasons why research is so poor in India. Let's take up, for example, first of all, the dilemma of a young Indian researcher. You see, the dilemma. Why I quote Wallace Stevens' poem is, I find that the dilemma of a young researcher is like the speaker in Stevens' poem, saying that I was of three minds, like a tree in which there are three blackbirds. What should I choose first, author, approach, or text? Usually, I've seen that when a young researcher comes to me, fresh after a master's, bursting with theory, she is of three minds. She's of three minds because what to do first, what to choose, what to select first, author, approach, or text. So typically the response would be that, "Sir, I really like feminism or post-colonialism, so which writer should I take up to apply the theory?" Or a researcher says, "Sir, I'm super excited about Margaret Atwood's work after watching Handmaid's Tale on Netflix. Can I take her up for research?" Or, sir, I'm reading Amitav Ghosh. Which theory can I apply to his works? Friends, this is what I call the cookie cutter approach. The cookie cutter approach. I mean, researchers who already have a particular theory in mind and want to apply it mechanically to whichever text they come across. Well, doing research is not riding your theoretical hobby horse. Doing research is not riding your theoretical hobby horse. In fact, it's very common, it's very common to read a paper where the researcher starts by describing a theorist and his big ideas, then to return to a close reading of the text in hand and ending the paper, more or less telling the reader that, you know what, that idea came from the big theorist that I told you about in the start. Well, it applies here. Reading such a paper is no one's idea of a good time. Trust me. When using theory, you must use it as a genuine. You must use the theory as a genuine interlocutor, not a voiceover. Let me repeat what I said. When applying theory to the reading of a text in your research paper, you must use the theoretical framework as a genuine interlocutor, not as a voiceover. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that as a researcher, you don't want to apply some theoretical concept X to some text Y, but rather, as a good researcher, you want to put both X and Y in a mutually altering relationship or a mutually symbiotic relationship, having both of them to come out of the interpretive process changed in some way. And when you do this, when you're able to do this in your research paper, you will get your aha moment, your eureka your eureka moment. So um, to return to that question of if you ask me, as many young researchers uh, often come to me asking, sir, what is the most difficult part in writing a research paper in literature? Is it identifying research problem, formulating a hypothesis, reviewing literature, or is it writing and citing? Well, I say all of them, all of them. All of them are not difficult, but they are challenging, and each one has its own challenges. Because research, even in humanities, research, whether it is in English studies or social sciences, humanities, social sciences, or the pure sciences, the basic, the underlying principles of good research are the same. Starting with a research question, starting with a research problem. To put it simply, research is asking questions. Asking the right questions is perhaps more important, because asking the right questions in research leads you to the identification of a research problem and sets you off on finding answers. So the first primary task, the first primary step, basic step in doing research, whether you're writing a paper or thinking about a thesis topic, is to start by asking the right questions. As I said, asking right questions leads you to the identification of a research problem, to the formulation of a hypothesis, and sets you off on a quest for finding answers. A researcher of mine wanted to work on Great War literature, that is literature of the First World War. And frankly, when he came to me, I said, I tried to dissuade him, saying that there has already been, there have already been libraries of research, tomes of research that have already been done on the subject. But then she was very, very adamant, or rather, shall I say, passionate about it. So I sort of goaded her to do a literature review, to come back to me after 2 weeks if she had identified a research question or a research gap. So a couple of weeks later, she came back with a bunch of, not one, but with a bunch of questions. For example, she said that, where are the women writers writing about the Great War? And if there were, why is it that their writings find no mention in most anthologies, most popular anthologies on war literature? So here, this was certainly a question worth investigating, a question that suggested the likelihood for her and for me, a question that suggested the likelihood of women's voices being erased or being glossed over in the well in the now, the well-established canonical male-centric canon of World War literature. When we talk of World War literature, we usually take up the writings of Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, Edward Thomas, etc. And so you, and we found that much of the critical commentary or the critical study on these male poets were also by male commentators. So we went back to now, seminal critical works on World War literature, like Paul Fussell's. I'm sure many of you would know Paul Fussell's The Great War and Modern Memory, or Stanley Cooperman's World War I and the American Novel. You see, the point I'm trying to make is that uh, uh, we start research by asking a question, and so in this case, for example, we found that that there seems to be a perception that that war literature, that women could not possibly write on war simply because it was a man's thing. Battle, guns, heroism, fighting on the battlefield, on the front, were supposed to be a man's domain, and therefore women possibly did not have the sensibility, nor the experience or the imagination to write about it. And so we set out by asking this question: where are women writers on war literature? And went on to prove this perception that a woman could not write about war because war was Hemingway's celebration, to prove this perception wrong. So we next proceeded to highlight or select works of three major women writers of the 20th century. My research student picked up Wheeler Carter, Edith Wharton, and Virginia Woolf. And we found that these, in their writings, they have critically, they show a serious engagement with war and its related issues. So, coming back to the question, what really is research? Well, to put it again very simply, research is a four-step process, which means that topic X is important. A lot of research has been done on it. And the third step would be, however, although nevertheless, no work has been done on the why aspect of it, and this paper or this thesis examines the why aspect. You see, if this is what I put it in a very, very simple formulaic step-by-step process, but the key thing that I want to draw your attention to is the use of the word however, although, nevertheless. I mean, this is, friends, the critical component of any research paper, the however, although, and the nevertheless. Because you see, steps 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, and 4 are often used in articles, in essay writings, not in research paper. Reports and articles do not use step 3. What is step 3? They do not identify a gap in the research literature. And reviewers of good journals, referee journals, or your careless journals, they want that step 3. Often there is a literature. In most papers, often there is a literature review in step 2, and then the researcher jumping to step 4. So the purpose of literature review is not clear. And what is it that a reviewer or a referee wants in a research paper, is trying to seek in a research paper? Whether the researcher has identified a gap. And step 3, therefore, however, although nevertheless no work has been done on the why aspect, is the identification of that gap that the researcher will plug in his research paper. So it helps us to understand this 4-step process. In fact, helps us to understand why a research paper is an argument and not merely a descriptive or expository essay. It makes us understand the importance of having a theoretical framework, doing a good review of previous literature on it, the purpose of a literature review, and why you collect and analyze data. So stating, I find that I kind of like research papers, even student assignments that begin some of my own research students, often I give them assignments on Milton's poetry. And so if a student begins her assignment with that very first line saying, this essay reads Milton's poetry in order to argue, or a research paper saying, by a student of mine, which says that Christopher Nolan's Memento is a film on trauma that operates on two different levels. I mean, if this is the opening line of an assignment of my MA students, I find it very interesting. I find, for two reasons. Why? If you ask me, for two reasons. One, it shows a higher skill in academic writing. Papers that begin with, say, papers which begin in this manner show evidence of a higher skill in academic writing. It shows an awareness of the student on about academic style and how to structure a paper or how to organize a paper. Also, because by beginning an assignment or beginning a paper in this fashion, it helps to signpost for the reader what is to come in the paper. The second reason I find such beginnings of papers interesting is, that you are stating your thesis statement. You're stating your thesis, in fact, right in the beginning, without beating about the bush. That is, you're telling the reader what is in your paper. A thesis statement, what do we mean by a thesis statement? Well, a thesis statement, so far as in research, is one where the researcher is telling us what he or she is going to argue in the paper. A thesis statement also tells us which method will the researcher use, what will be his method, what will be his theoretical framework in his analysis, and what aspects he will present and in what sequence. In fact, a good, if you answer these questions in the very introduction of your research paper, that is, what is the paper all about? How will you write about what you're going to write? That is, what method are you going to deal what method or theoretical framework you're going to use in dealing with the subject, and when. If you answer these three questions at the beginning of your research paper, what, how, and when, like we do in journalistic writing, for example, then you will surely make the reader interested in your paper. In other words, you will make the paper reader friendly. So for a research paper, the cardinal rule is that you have to have an argument. And therefore, you have on the slide what Professor Fenton says, that we are looking for a thesis statement that someone might take issue with. What is a good research paper? What is a good research topic? Well, I'm sure that today we are joined by participants who would wish to know about interdisciplinary research. Well, obviously, I mean, a good research topic is one that should be novel, that should be interesting, that should be imaginative, that should be relevant, that should be topical. And if it's like asking, it's like if you were a young researcher, your ability to relate what you are going to do in the next couple of years to things that are happening around you should make your research interesting. For example, I mean, if the recent news of another hike in petrol and diesel prices, did it spoil your morning tea? Well, you see, what I'm saying is that when you think of oil and you think of petrol hike, you're not just thinking about automobiles or derricks or spectacular spills or barrel prices. The computer today, the computer or the phone on which you and I are connected is made out of material from oil. So it is no exaggeration to suggest that our modern culture is a hydrocarbon culture. So for a young researcher wanting to do interdisciplinary research, this is an opening. A petrol hike or a pocket that petrol burns in, is to examine, for example, literature's relation with energy sources, and that itself can become a hot topic. It can become a hot topic. It can become a hot topic because you can actually explore the representation of oil or carbon in fiction, and which might lead you to some interesting questions, fascinating areas of study. For example, it might lead you to ask, does oil possess a cultural capital? Is oil represented in fiction? Or for that matter, it may push you to ask, what happens when we rethink of literary timelines, not by ages, not by 18th century literature, 19th century literature, or 20th century literature, or even not by thinking of literary timelines by the history of ideas, romanticism and modernism and postmodernism, but is it even possible to think of literary timelines in terms of energy resources, the prevailing source of energy, the energy source that was prevalent during that time, like wood, tallow, coal, oil, or solar energy? To think of Dickens, we can't think of Dickens without thinking of tallow, for example, without thinking of chimney sweepers and candles and soot. We can't think of D.H. Lawrence, without thinking of coal and collieries. So that becomes a fascinating study, a new area to look at from the interdisciplinary point of view, to examine and interrogate the relationship between petrol or carbon culture with fiction, or for that matter, recently, I mean, for the last 2 years, there has been a lot of talk in the parliament, debates in the parliament about a surrogacy bill, the act of, a bill that seeks to ban or prohibit or delegalize the what is called commercial surrogacy, single fathers, single parenthood, having babies born out of by renting wombs. So if that is the case, then is it possible that that a social issue, that a burning topic such as this, has it been taken by fiction writers? Well, you would be surprised to know there are quite a few novels which have been written, and in fact, my own inquiry into this area has led me to write a paper whose title you see as the second on your slide, the second bullet. Whose baby is it anyway? Marketing motherhood and outsourcing booms and narratives of the nature. So, friends, what I'm trying to suggest again here is that in order to make your research, quality research, interesting, you've got to be making it interesting and engaging. You need to make it contemporary. You need to make it topical. Um, well, this is a book that I would recommend to all the participants. This is a book called Research Methods for English Studies. It's edited by Gabriel Griffin, and basically in the book, Griffin sort of makes a distinction between research skills, methods, and methodologies. And research skills, according to Griffin, are simply techniques for handling material. They include library skills, computational skills, dissertation skills, even IT skills or computer skills today, or period specific. She includes period specific skills. That is learning to read manuscripts, for example, old manuscripts. So when we talk about, so these are skills according to her. But when we talk about methods, research methods are, according to her, are how you carry out your research, whether which is the method that you apply: archival, visual, discourse analysis, ethnographic methods, or simple close analysis, or what we call textual analysis. So the choice of research method, in friends, will depend upon the kind of research one wants to do. I mean, a research topic such as you know such as post-coloniality, nationalism, and Bhadralok identity in contemporary Bengali poetry in English translation. I mean, if this were a paper that you were writing, post-coloniality, nationalism, and Bhadralok identity in contemporary Bengali poetry in English translation, well, that's actually the title of one of my research papers. Then obviously you will be using translation. Your method will be one of translation and comparative method of analysis. It might also require you to include oral interviews with because remember, it's all about contemporary Bengali poetry in translation. So you might have to reach out and have interviews or prepare a questionnaire. So archival. So these are the many methods that one would. So the choice of research method, it depends upon the kind of research that you would be doing. One thing is important here, that that one often uses a combination of methods. There's no single method. One does not use one single method, although the methodological framework needs to be the same, is more often the case the same, meaning whether it is post-colonialism, or feminism, or third wave feminism, or third world feminism, etc. So the methodological framework remains the same, but the methods that you as a researcher will adopt will depend upon the nature of your inquiry. All right. So I think, okay. I come back to how I started my talk, and that was to talk about titles, And what you see again on the slide is a slide which says, "Does your title tell or yell?" Does your title tell or yell? And once again, I mean, the three examples that I have I've put on the slide are obviously titles that don't tell, but they yell. Um, and I can give you an example. Um, an example from some of my own titles, not for a minute suggesting that they are the best titles or this is what quality research is all about, but I'm sharing the title of some of my own papers because this is something that works for me. The template works for me. This is a template that I've used almost regularly in the last so many years. And giving a title like the first one, When Jane Austen Meets Twitter, Bridging the Digital Divide in the English Classroom. What you will find in the titles of these papers is that often, that there is a common template. It begins with the title has a stem part, the first part, and then followed by a colon. And what follows the colon is a more descriptive subtitle. For example, the myth and the making of Mahatma in popular culture. Here, I was actually exploring how popular media, including calendar art posters, for example, have iconized Gandhi. Right. So this works for me. I mean, the template works for me. That I often put the titles of my papers in this fashion. In fact, you would have noticed that the title of my talk also follows the same template. Are you a paper tiger? Followed by a colon, and then I talk about research academia and research writing. So this works for me. Well, if it works for you, it would be great. The point really is that while snappy titles help your abstract to be noticed, it's really what comes after the colon that sells the abstract. So pay attention to it. I mean, if you were a student of MA and if you were writing a paper and you titled it as all the world's a ship. If you were writing a paper, let's say on Melville's Moby Dick, and you titled your paper "All the World's a Ship," let's say race and ethnicity in Moby Dick. Well, that would certainly catch my eye, but I find that it still is a very vague and ambiguous title. So a better title for me would be somebody, an MA student of mine, writing a paper titled, something like Melville's Deconstruction of Ethnicity in the Midnight Forecastle episode of Moby Dick. I mean, this is a title that works for me because it is specific, it is particular, and it also sort of promises to deliver what I'm looking for as the researchable element in the paper. So, friends, at the end of the day, what you must remember is that all research writing must be reader-centric. Therefore, it is important to have a good title to your paper. But there's another important reason why you should be paying more attention to your titles. I mean, you see, internet research databases store thousands of papers today on the same subject, on the subject or topic of your paper. So internet browsers looking for a paper may actually read hundreds of titles before they select an abstract to read. And so giving a catchy title actually increases the chances of your paper catching the eye of the researcher, and thereby multiplying the citation value of your paper. Well, here comes your API score and your CAS. So every word in your title, therefore, is important and must be given a lot of thought. Things to remember when writing a title. Well, these are a few things. They are self-explanatory, and you would find these in any manual on good academic writing. There's nothing original about the points on the slide. They are self-explanatory, but you could run your eyes over them. Things to remember when writing a title. That it had, I mean, eye-catching and dynamic is what I've been emphasizing, and be concise and specific and informative. Well, I find that writing a research paper is like telling a story. A good story needs a good beginning to hook the reader. In a similar way, I snappy titles and good opening lines, which give you the thesis statement or which actually tell what you are going to do, what you're going to be doing in the paper, is so important. So just as beginning your story on a good note, on an exciting note is important, well, so is the conclusion of a story, and so is the conclusion of a of your paper. So what should be the nature of your endings? Well, I personally, this is the most difficult part for in my own research writing. I find it pretty hard. Um, I feel endings like Tolstoy's, that famous quotation about families, that happy families are all happy in the same way, but unhappy families, each unhappy family is unhappy in a different way. I find that you could experiment a lot so far as when you think about how to end your paper, how to conclude your paper. Personally, I find the endings the hardest to write, but I could say that, well, there are two possible ways of ending your paper: a common and an uncommon one. First, the beaten path. The road that often, where you have, for example, what the the step A, where your conclusion is basically a summing up of your paper. What you put is a reworking. You restate the points in a different way, and or you point out the significance of the essay. Well, that is the traditional or conventional way of ending your paper. The other is the uncommon way, and I'll give you two examples, and with that I'll end my talk. The second way is what I call the Sherlock Holmes style conclusion, not about repeating what has already been said in the paper, but telling, for example, pushing the paper in the direction of what will be the future. What does all this evidence lead to? What does the future hold? So here is an example of my own paper, a conclusion from my own paper, which is the common way. So pretty much the old-fashioned way of ending a paper, and that is let me reiterate. This is a paper. This is a conclusion from a paper that I wrote on pointing out the intersections, the interconnections between gated communities and how gated communities, how we stay in gated communities. Our modes of living in gated communities actually problematizes the notion of citizenship and surveillance. So I ended that paper in this very traditional, old-fashioned way. Let me reiterate the two main contentions of my paper, and then I said first, and then I said second. Now, this is hand-holding the reader, telling him this is how, this is what you put in the paper, in the body of the paper, and you are reminding the reader, this is what these are the central or the core arguments in the paper. But the uncommon conclusion is the one that I have on your slide, and that is, this is of course from many of you would have read this seminal paper written by Donna Haraway, titled "The Cyborg Manifesto: Science, Technology, and Socialist Feminism in the Late 20th Century." Well, what I want to point out, draw your attention, is to the last para, where she says that from the point of view of pleasure in these potent and taboo fusions made inevitable by the social relations of science and technology, there might indeed be a feminist science. Now, if you have not read the paper, well, I would recommend you to read it. But what is interesting is, even if you miss out the meaning of what she says in the conclusion, I want to point out the style, or rather the structure. What she seems to say is that there might indeed be a feminist science. This is an uncommon, I call it an uncommon ending, because unlike the conventional paper, the paper ends on a note of prediction, the possibility of a future, the possibility of a feminist science, in the future. So these are, the second conclusion. This has the second conclusion is the uncommon or the less traveled path, where the ending is also a beginning, where the ending is also the beginning, where you're sometimes it is good to use your conclusion to ask a new question or move the idea in your paper in a new direction, like in the Haraway example, Donna Haraway example on this slide. And so sometimes you can even conclude that there is no conclusion in your paper. In some arguments, the conclusion is actually the thesis. So, for a young researcher, for all of you researchers, my advice would be play around with your ending like you did with your beginning. Remember, your conclusion is the last thing that your reader will read. So do try to keep up the energy level and keep the reader's interest sustained in the paper. A final comment on research, on how to write research, and that is, again, it's a quote from the same book, Umberto Eco's How to Write a Thesis, where he says that a thesis is like a chess game that requires a player to plan in advance all the moves he will make to checkmate his opponent. Well, this advice is gold standard because it once again emphasizes the systematic nature in which you need to do research, right? But what I'd like to end my talk with is the importance of revising one's paper as one last step, but a crucial step. In fact, we often tend to think of revision, the process of revising our thesis or a rough draft of your paper, as merely error fixing. Well, it isn't. It isn't, friends. Revision means rethinking. Revision means readjusting. Revision means rewriting. So, here, what I'd like to point out is don't get attached to your drafts. Don't get attached to your drafts. Don't get lazy with your own writing, thinking that once you put 3,000 words in a paper, well, that's it. That's it. As if you have etched it in stone. No. As the quote says, paragraphs don't bleed. Paragraphs don't bleed. It's okay to cut them out. So free yourself up to delete anything from your own writing that detracts from your main argument or your point. Because revising a paper or thesis demands that you be your best or maybe your sharpest critic. So be an Ezra bound to your own writing. And finally, strictly follow the latest conventions that the journal requires. There again, I find many a researcher slipping up on it, not following the conventions, let's say, of the MLA 8th edition or the Chicago style manual or the APA style. Be very careful about this, because if you really are wanting to publish in good quality research journals, then you must not be lax in the formatting of your paper, the stylistic formatting of your paper. So, are you a paper tiger? What sort of a researcher are you? One, I hope, who believes that a research paper is a piece of textual analysis that adds your critical voice to an ongoing conversation. One who believes that that research is when you make your own critical voice, rigorous, engaging, and innovative. It's only then that we become something more than paper tigers. Because as paper tigers, well, you would only be stalking Google for API scores. But researchers contributing something of value, you need to be doing something that will contribute value to your discipline. So instead of research that is Google search or Google research or Control-C and Control-V research, well, that's not research, of course. We should be trying to make our research truly an adventure of the mind and truly an exploration of new horizons. Thank you so much. I hope I've kept time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a knowledgeable session. I know when I speak for everyone that we all had something to take away from. For me, it was about beginning a research paper. Often, when I work on stories, I find myself at wit's end, not knowing how to start a story. So, even though you spoke on research and everything, your insights on the introduction of the research paper was very interesting to me. Now, Dr. Banerjee will take questions from the audience. Please send your questions in the chat box.
Well, somebody says there is a question. Please share your number again. Well, okay. um,
Sindhu ma'am, I think there are no questions in the chat box.
Well, it actually fails my talk on research because I said the first step of research is to ask questions, the right questions. So here,
Sir,
We do have a question, sir, in the chat box.
just a minute.
yeah.
Follow MLA and not Harvard. It's not a question of why do we follow different journals. For example, different journals have different citation styles. So more likely, journal is from North America, from one of the North American universities. They would insist on you following the Chicago style. On the other hand, in India, the predominant format, stylistic format that we follow is that of the MLA 8th edition. And again, we've got to be following the latest edition of MLA.
But sir, just as we follow American English spellings and all when we are doing research on American writer, why are we not following English style? Will our research be valid if we follow MLA in London also or UK?
I think I've answered that question. It depends upon the place, the location of the publication. If the research journal where you're placing your paper, is a North American journal, then they probably would ask you to follow the Chicago manual style. It's not about doing research on American writers or British writers. It depends upon the location or the location of the publication.
And what about thesis, sir? Doctoral thesis?
Doctoral thesis, we follow, in India, we are following the MLA latest edition. Following the MLA 8th edition.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So I suppose
Sindhu ma'am.
May I request the participants to mute themselves, please? A lot of background noise is there. Dr. Pramtik Banerjee, it was really wonderful to listen to you in the second Sunday Sahityik Satsang, wherein you are the speaker for the second time. And indeed, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the platform of iSPELL. And what you said in the beginning, that research should start with a question. And if there is no question, it means you hailed, so the participants failed in asking the questions. So when you hail, then definitely the other person is going to fail in asking a question. And moreover, as far as research is concerned, even to ask a question, the person has to research. So people haven't done the research to ask the question. And secondly, what you have said is absolutely right. As far as research is concerned, it's like brainstorming. And until and unless you satisfy your own mind, until and unless you satisfy your own heart, until and unless you bend down for research, until and unless you make yourself sure about doing the research, and until and unless you study on your own and do a kind of a what you call it as introspection of yourself as far as research is concerned, then only the quality of research will come. And nowadays, having lot many social medias and lot many resources which are available, research has come into a particular frame of cut and paste, which has to be absolutely it has to be kept aside. And being the supervisors, being the teachers, we must always encourage the new minds to come with different kinds of things and to attempt new things. Even people ask about the secondary sources. The secondary sources are the people, those who are going to read it and they are going to write about it. Lot many secondary sources are not going to help you until and unless you generate your own secondary source out of the primary source which is available to you. And that's why you need to bend down on the primary source. You need to read between the lines. You need to go into the periphery and then come into the the focus or the center point to to deliberate all these things. So in a way, you have not only taken a wider canvas of each and everything, but taking the wider canvas, you have brought into the hub, you have brought into the focus, and this is the kind of deliberation which everyone must listen and at the same time must execute, and also they must propagate it wherever they are, maybe in the classroom, maybe with the research scholars, maybe with the students, maybe with the faculty members, because until and unless you do a kind of a discussion, these things cannot be propagated in a well-defined manner. So thank you very much for doing the honors.
It's been a pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for those comments, for those observations, Dr. Gancha.
So you have two more questions in the chat box.
I was looking at it. Will it be right to decide a tentative title for a paper or thesis initially and then keep updating it in the process of research? Yes, of course. I mean, you see, everything is tentative. I mean, doing research is whether you're writing a 5,000 word paper or whether you're writing a thesis. Like I was telling towards the end of my talk, revision, being an Ezra Pound to your own writing, to your own words is very important. So, yeah, it's always good to keep a tentative title in the beginning. Why? Because a title anchors your writing. A title sort of always is a roadmap, or it sort of keeps you focused on what you are going to write. In fact, I have a suggestion to Nevis Vanan, isn't it? He's the one who's been asking. To put what you're going to write in the paper, to put it in the form of not one question, but let's say 5 questions or 10 questions. The number is not important. I mean, this works for me that if I, my first brainstorming, my first attempt to be a paper tiger or not a paper tiger is to put everything that comes to my mind in the form of questions. 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, whatever. Put them all there, and then sometimes these questions related to the topic would actually help you to structure and organize or even decide the sequence of your body paragraphs, the way in which you move from one argument to the next. It will also help you to prioritize. It'll help you to choose which of the answers to these questions would actually make the main argument, the central argument, or the central thesis positions, and which would be secondary or supplementary. So it works for me that whenever I begin writing a paper, not only do I give a tentative title to it. A tentative title is important. Why? Because I put my keywords there. My keywords there. So if while planning for this talk, I was asked to, or rather, I was asked to, give a talk, take a session on research writing. So notice that, and to make it a little more relevant, I thought that I would begin my introduction by focusing on this sort of mad race for CAS points and API scores, which in fact has done a lot of damage in bringing down the quality of research in India. Make it topical, and then put it down. Put the key words there in the title. So I think it always helps when you start your research by putting forth a set of questions at the beginning and then seek answers and put them in the main body of your research paper. There is another question by Priyanka Sharma. May I read it out? While working on thesis, I often get lost in the labyrinth of ideas. One after another, I keep on chasing, but I find it impossible to reach a point where I can start my own writing. I always feel that there is still much more to know. How do I convince myself that now I should start writing? Oh yeah, I think this is very important. It's a very good question. In fact, research starts when you start writing, not when you start reading. Research is when you start writing, when you put pen to paper or the mouse to the screen. That is when research is, because all other things that you do before and after the point of writing is actually just one is a preparation or an anticipation of what you're going to research, and the other is a revision. often it becomes also an exercise in vacillation, to put off your writing by reading a lot of papers on academia, or in in many journals, is basically to allow yourself to be adrift, to be adrift. So when you say that I often get lost in the labyrinth of ideas, believe me, every researcher does get lost in a labyrinth of ideas, but then you need to pull up and breathe for air. You need to pull up on the surface and breathe for air. And you do that when you put the first word on the blank page. So research is when you start writing, not when you start reading, when you start putting your thoughts on paper. So start that process. As someone said, writing is so easy. All you have to do is look at a blank paper, at a blank page, and wait until drops of blood appear on your forehead. I think the chat box seems to have no more. Yeah. Somebody.
Hello, sir. Can
Yeah.
I? Uh, so you suggested a title first in the first slide about the language acquisition device. I thought, could it be like the nuances of language acquisition device would have been enough for the title?
Yeah.
Or the
You could rework. Yeah, that's one way to rework
Yeah.
a rather dense and heavy title. You would have
Yeah.
noticed that that there are no verbs in that title.
Yeah, exactly.
And remember what we did in grammar and composition. Messrs. Wren and Martin always said that
Yeah.
that if you want to excite your readers on what you're reading, you got to put your action verbs there, right? It's a title which is full of noun phrases and compound nouns without a verb, right?
Yeah.
So change it and make it attractive. You needed to put a verb there, or a couple of verbs, certainly. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay. How to get get rid of the ideas of research papers we have read on the topic of our research. No, you don't have to get rid of. In fact, Chandan Soni asked this question. You don't have to get rid of it. In fact, like I said, research is to enter into a conversation like an informed participant, which means that research is not about all your ideas and your insights. In fact, research is debate. Research is discussion. Research is debate. Research is discussion. So you inquire into a field, into a new area or a topic where there are already voices. And therefore, when we think of research, we think of literature review. Literature review is to look at the ideas of what others have said on your topic before, and what new, therefore, what they haven't said, and therefore what new you can say by contributing, by plugging that research gap.
Yes, sir. Got it, sir.
So one more thing, if you don't mind. I think every researcher should be very familiar with all the theories and then practically apply it based on the works that they choose.
With one caveat, yes. Yes, you're right that a theoretical a grounding in theory is important, right?
Yeah.
But then one must not, as I pointed out earlier, one must not, try and apply just because one is infatuated or one likes a particular theory, whether it is feminism or post-colonialism, or cyber theory. One shouldn't be purposefully seeking out texts where you can apply. I mean, it should be the relationship between theory and text should be an organic one.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the real work should attract that particular theory, if that is the case. I mean, yeah, I think so. Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful presentation.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And there is somebody who's written API has become academia polluting indicator, which is so true.
Sir, it's me who has written that.
Oh,
Because I have seen over the years, its API is not only polluting the people, but it has polluted the academia to a
absolutely.
greater extent.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
everyone is running behind writing the paper. Tom, Dick, and Harry is writing the paper without having research in it. They are not even searching anything, and there is no research. As far as research is concerned, everyone has become the supervisor. Everyone has become the researcher, and the researchers, they come to us, sir, give me any topic, I'll work on it, as if they are the Sarvajna. So what is the need to have a supervisor then?
Absolutely, and allow me the liberty to use your definition, academic polluting indicator, in the next talk.
Certainly, sir, you can. And what Chandan has written, get rid of, rather than get rid of, it is better to ride on it than to get rid of.
Right,
Because you
right,
need to
yeah.
control it.
Yeah, he who rides the paper tiger is the one who delivers the right paper.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ghanshyam sir.
Sindhu ma'am, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, continue.
Yes, sir. So, owing to a technological emergency, Dr. Ajit couldn't grace the occasion today. I now request Dr. Sachdeva, sir, the Vice President of iSPELL India, to deliver the concluding remarks and to present the certificates of appreciation to the speakers of the event.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. And a very good evening to you, Professor Sachdeva.
A very good
pleasure.
evening to you.
Honor to you.
Honorable Dr. Prantik Banerjee, sir, Professor at Hislop College, Nagpur, and Dr. Sindhu Nagraj, who is the Master of Ceremony, Dr. Virendra Tukar, who is the event coordinator. Just a short while ago, I received a call from Dr. Virendra that I have to speak, give a concluding remarks. And in fact, I was on the system and I have been listening to the lecture and enjoying this intellectual deliberation. It has been really a wonderful discourse, intellectual deliberation on research. The title itself is very catchy. The Paper Tiger is very fascinating and it drew my attention as well. What sir has talked about, the various aspects of the framing of the title, computer skills, research methods, methodology, so many things sir has talked about, and also how to frame the provide the thesis statement itself in the very title, in the title itself. The title should reflect the thesis statement, and so I think the other subtitles as well, because the scheme of chapterization is equally very tricky, and the preface writing, which so this thing I have been telling my own students also, that the title should be very specific. They should be not very general. They should not be a chautarfa kind of topics like a critical study or thematic study of the works of novels of Margaret Atwood and so on. Not to take much of your time, I would like to add a few more things. Actually, the topic is very vast. It cannot be comprehended in just one lecture. So this lecture of Dr. Prantik Banerjee is an inspiration in itself, which arouses curiosity to read more and more about it, about the research formatting, the style sheet, MLA Handbook of Method or Research Methodology, 9th edition or 8th edition, whatever be the case. But nowadays, as far as the computer skills are concerned, what I can see is that the time has gone when we used to type out a thesis, a dissertation in manual typewriter or on the electronic typewriter. So is the case with the computer now. Computer or Microsoft is not adequate. They are inadequate nowadays. So we must take recourse to various thesis writing softwares which can be labor-saving devices. They help us organize our ideas, just like we have a Scrivener. I think we cannot imagine writing a thesis out without the help of such softwares like Scrivener, like Manly reference managers, like Shakespeare 4 Pro, and like Notion. So they are wonderful tools which help us as to organize our ideas. What Prantik Banerjee said in the interactions session that we have to arrange, organize our chapters. For example, we need to write all the questions, jot down all the questions, and then we can organize those questions and search answers for them. So I think such softwares and digital tools. Beside this, nowadays we require a number of smaller tools and digital tools, computer skills, applications which are there at our disposal, which we can make full use of it. Nowadays, the time has come that we no longer need a typist, or we need not go to the typist for typesetting, sitting with the typist for long hours and dictating and directing him to do the setting for us, which we can do ourselves. We can type ourselves, and there are a number of methods of getting things typed and getting it done. And so, so I think the Scrivener, Manly Reference Manager, Notion, Shakespeare 4, and few more other Max Deca, and with the help of which we can go according to what Dr. Prantik Banerjee has said, that let us come, what the first question that comes to us, let us jot it down, search the answers, and keep on doing the work. And then those things can be very well managed with the help of these tools. So this, I congratulate Dr. Prantik Banerjee on such a wonderful enlightening, which is a need of the time. And this is an area which even the PhD coursework classes are not sufficient, not quite, satisfying or gratifying as such lectures are. So lectures from the experts like Prantik Banerjee, they provide us, they give us a lot of guidance, support, and they give us the clues and the cues how to manage and how to proceed. A lot many questions have been answered by Prantik Banerjee, sir, and he has been going through his slides, and they were unfolding various aspects of research and research methodology. So I congratulate him, I congratulate iSPELL, and I congratulate General Secretary iSPELL and all the EC members on organizing such a wonderful lecture. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. Thank you.
Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please present the certificate.
Yes. Indian Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature, iSPELL, is pleased to give away the certificates to the, first of all, this certificate of appreciation goes to Dr. Prantik Banerjee, Associate Professor of English, Hislop College, Nagpur, for delivering the expertise as keynote speaker on third event of iSPELL. The topic is, are you a paper tiger? Academia Research. Today is on 17th April 22. I'm very pleased to honor him with this certificate. Sir, please accept this certificate. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Now, this certificate of appreciation goes to Dr. Sindhu Nagraj, the sub-editor digital team, who happened to be master of ceremony of this particular iSPELL event. Over to Sindhu Nagraj. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Dr.
Thank you
Sindhu.
so much. Honorable audience, respected Dr. Banerjee, Mr. Chairman, sir, our most valued invited guests, Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of iSPELL and the entire team, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Dr. Prantik Banerjee for gracing the occasion and sharing with us your valuable findings on the subject today. Thank you, sir. I must mention a deep sense of appreciation for Chairperson Dr. Ajit, Event Coordinator Dr. Virendra Turkar, General Secretary and Founder of iSPELL India Dr. G. Gansham sir, President Anupama Ora, IT Coordinator Pramod Dengde, President of East Maharashtra Forum Dr. Yogesh Sarode. I also thank all members of iSPELL India, the South Karnataka Forum, the East Maharashtra Forum, audience and participants in the session today. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record my hearty thanks to iSPELL for giving me an opportunity to be the master of this ceremony. Once again, I want to state that we are all very grateful to all speakers on the stage. We thank you for being with us this evening. It's been a great pleasure. With the permission from the President, the Vice President, I now declare that the session is over. Thank you very much.
Just a minute, Sindhu. Pramod, can we have the flyer of the next session, please? Pramod?
Yes, sir. Yes, presenting.
Yeah. So friends, indeed, all the Sunday Sahityik Satsangs of iSPELL are not only thought-provoking, but they are enlightening too. And on 23rd of April, we are going to celebrate the Bard. So we are having the Sunday Sahityik Satsang based on the Bard of Avon, William Shakespeare, and the speaker for that is Dr. Lara Hansen Morse. So do attend the 84th Sunday Sahityik Satsang of iSPELL, and please make a note, the time is now changed. Instead of 4 o'clock, we are having it on 6 p.m. because it's 5:30 a.m. in USA for the speaker to speak on. So that's why we have shifted from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So kindly bear with us, and those who are interested to form iSPELL forums in their states and regions, they are most welcome. iSPELL within a span of 2 years has spread into nook and corners of the country by having 8 forums. And we need to have many more forums, not only to make the people understand about the art and the language, but at the same time to bring the people on a particular platform and to make them aware of the nuances in the fields of language and literature, and also to facilitate and elevate. We have Chhattisgarh Forum, Tripura, South Karnataka, Rajasthan, West Bengal, East Maharashtra, Assam, and Tamil Nadu. If you are quite interested to form a forum in your state or region, kindly contact iSPELL. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay connected. Till the next event, stay healthy and have a good academic deliberation. So thanks from iSPELL to all the people, those who were there on the platform.